cannabis has been, built from the trenches of the black market, from being illegal, being worried about getting busted and arrested, and then pushing for legalization and lobbying and passion to get it to where it's at now. It's becoming more and more normalized as we go, and to have corporate brands next to them more and more, I think shows the validity of what we've all been saying forever, that this is a plant that should be a part of our life, forward-facing and publicly, because we shouldn't have to hide in the shadows.
All right, here we are with Jason Zahler with Canna Management Group. And I know that, not looking at my notes because I can see your shirt.
Thank you. Self-promotion.
Yeah, no, I want to talk to you because cannabis is, even though it's been legal, I'm from Colorado, so we're very cannabis aware. We have the whole tourism industry in Colorado. It is still a challenging business. And I think people, especially here in California, they're like, oh, we're going to grow, we're going to launch a business, but it is hard, right? If not impossible, because banking, regulatory. There's this guy, I did a story, 5 years ago when cannabis was still like this big mystery, and he had a big grow operation out in Sterling, Colorado, right? Which is kind of a conservative place to have a grow. And, you have to trade in cash, right? All the transactions in cannabis still are in cash. And he needed a John Deere tractor, right, for his grow. It's big. It was a significant farm. And he had to pay cash for a tractor, right? And so the John Deere guy has bags of dollars sitting all around, the facility. And it's just kind of like a joke because that really hasn't changed. But before we get into that, let's talk about what you guys do at Canna Management Group and sort of what your goals are. And then I want to talk about your journey, right? Because you have like this really, kind of like a hodgepodgey background. Yeah. So let's jump in. Let's talk about what you guys do, because you are not a grower. You are not Cheech and Chong, right? Like, what do you guys do?
Well, interesting enough, my business partner, Greg, who's unable to make it today,
he's
ill. He's the grower of the team.
Right.
20 years experience. He trained under Josh D, who's a famous grower. My background is, as you said, sales and marketing and advertising. And when I first got into cannabis was when I left the marketing and advertising industry with my magazine, Skinny Magazine. I noticed a lot of similarities to the industries, the culture, right?
Yeah.
So Skinny Magazine was a lifestyle magazine. We had like Danny Trejo on the cover, Stevie Aoki, distributed in 5 major markets on the West Coast. We're in business 15 years, but there's this lifestyle culture, which is why we started doing events to promote the magazine, to do magazine release parties. Cannabis is very similar. You look at the cookies, the Stizzies, Jeter. They have merchandise now. The brands. There's a culture that mimics very closely to the entertainment industry.
Yeah, it's super, super interesting. So, how did you go? Like, how did you actually make that decision to go into? First of all, let's talk about what you guys do at Canna, right?
Question.
Because you're not a dispensary. Right. So let's dispel of that myth right now and talk, because what you're doing is so cool. Right. So you, in your words, tell us what you guys do.
It's a good question. And it's an easier answer is, what don't we do? Our company is, we call ourselves a vertically integrated cannabis marketing and consulting agency with no licenses.
Right.
Which is by design. We've both owned and operated dispensaries, delivery services, manufacturing, and cultivation. Prop 215 days, pre-licensing, when it was gray. You had like 1,000, medical records on your wall at your office, and that's how you were operating. Remember,
especially down in Venice Beach, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Every other office was you just go in there and say, "I'm sick," and you get your medical card. So we've done that so long that when we transitioned into the license market, we sold all of our assets, got rid of all of our grows, got rid of our delivery services, and wanted to be straight legal, licensed, legit business. And what we found is, we were going to go get a license, and we found an investor. We found a property up in Coachella, went down that path. And what we found is that it's not easy.
It's not easy.
And we made a good move, because most of the people who did what we almost did, we went, I learned how to do a pro forma the first time, 8 years ago with the situations. Now I've done hundreds of them for clients. But what we learned is that it's not easy. Nobody knew what they're doing yet. Coachella Valley was, Desert Hot Springs was the first market that had commercial cannabis with Candescent. It was all over NBC and all this stuff. They're out of business already. So there's an example of I'm glad that we didn't go down the path of getting our own license, because instead we were able to help other license holders find the path. And we've done that successfully now over the last 6-7 years.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's really interesting because the whole industry is kind of known as the green entrepreneur movement. And, like all these startups who are like we were talking about, who just are like gung ho, guns blazing. Oh, did you catch that?
Yeah.
Into the cannabis industry. Like, let's talk about some of the mistakes, right? Like, clearly you have identified, a need for, like, Cheech and Chong don't know what a pro forma is, right? Yeah. Like that is a startup business concept. So let's talk about that a little bit.
I'm glad you mentioned. Actually, it's a good segue into how many celebrities have launched brands unsuccessfully, unfortunately. Not to say any names, but some major names that they're synonymous for cannabis, right?
Right.
Launching a brand, like you said, not just a pro forma, but also how do you market? How do you make it organic? How do you make it real and legitimate versus just putting your name on it and put it on the shelves? That doesn't work. Especially a lot of people are putting together like some corporate investors. So you get this, this corporate money, and then you have this legacy, which means either the OGs, the founders of this culture, and you put them together. And there's a lot of challenges, and that don't usually always work out.
Right.
And what my partner and I have done is we've come from both worlds. We come from a corporate background in sales and marketing and advertising. He owned a mortgage company before. I've been in media marketing and advertising at the corporate level, but we also have lived the culture and the lifestyle of it our whole lives. I sold weed in high school,
right.
joints.
Right.
I'd buy ounces and sell joints I was in the wrestling and water polo and diving, and I would sell them to my friends, all the football players. Like, so it's transitioned for, now 40 years, because I'm 51 years old now. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So go back to the, like, we were kind of taking that exit ramp onto the topic of like the challenges, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's so cool to have a big idea, right? And to say, oh, I see the healing properties of cannabis products. Like, but what are the biggest mistakes you see should we call them green entrepreneurs, or should we is there a
There's
different
many
name?
fun words for it, but that's one you hear
All
a
right,
lot.
we'll just use that for now. What are the biggest mistakes you've seen these green entrepreneurs make?
I think it's spending. And when you first get that investor dollar, from what it seems like from our experience and our past clients, and looking at these pro formas, like you said, is overspending or spending on the wrong line items, right? Like marketing, spending lots of money on events, but then actually, this is a big challenge since we produce a lot of the trade show after parties. One of the things we've learned is that these businesses will go buy a booth, 50, 100 grand, spend a couple $100,000 on staff, the whole thing, and then don't really have a plan of action to capture all the contacts and leads they got. And even if they do capture them, how do they engage them afterwards in a meaningful way to get an ROI? And that's one of the challenges that we've seen. And we've been fortunate enough to try to help our clients with on our events to actually map that out for them and give them a pathway to success.
And why do you think, when I hear events, conferences, after parties, I sort of hearken back to, the mid 90s, when that's what reporters were doing and all of this. Talk to me about why an analog outlet like a conference, an after party, a magazine, why does that work so well for the cannabis industry and cannabis startups?
That's a good question. Mainly it's community. This industry was built on community a little bit. Many industries have been built by a community, but cannabis has been, built from the trenches of, the black market, from being illegal, being worried about getting busted and arrested, and then pushing for legalization and lobbying and like passion to get it to where it's at now. So I think that's why it's a little bit different than when you go to like a trade show for fashion or for electronics or what have you. It's a different vibe. If you go to a cannabis trade show, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's more of a, how can we make this happen? How do we figure this out together? What are your pain points? Oh man, banking. Yes. Yeah. You have receivables is a big problem right now, because it's hard to take somebody to court because you can't take them to federal court.
Right.
So if somebody stiffs you for $100,000 through their dispensaries, there's not a lot you can do about it. So these are the challenges that we talk about at these conferences, on top of promoting the brand, trying to get them on the shelves, which is the main job, of course.
Right.
Task.
And so like when you're, aggregating the data from a conference and you've got all these people, like, it's super cool to have a brand and a nice name and cool packaging and, dispensaries and whatever. How do they, like once you get that data in their hands about the people and the trends and what do they do with it?
Sometimes they don't know what to do with it. So that's why we have to steer them in that direction. But it's basically just taking that information, looking at the segments of your product. Like if you have an edible company, what does that segment look like in the industry? What is it growing? What percentage of growth?
Yeah.
What's the market share? How many other brands are in that market share? And then either capitalizing on that or finding a niche that's not being filled and then trying to capitalize on that so you can make an impact either by revenue sales or using that niche to get in the store so then you can get them to carry your other SKUs, your flower, your vapes. No company right now is successful with just a pre-roll. Like that's not the best use of your time and your sales reps' time. When you get in there, you want shelf space.
Right. And is there, like when we look back at history and sort of consumer, like this is a consumer play, right? Mm-hmm. Is there an analogous to the cannabis industry? Like, has there ever been, this sort of unmoored opportunity out there that you look to for, case studies, things that have sort of, you can steal from? Like, what would that be?
That's a good question. There's not in the cannabis space.
We have
to look at other industries, and then they're still different. Like we refer to the liquor industry a lot because it's it was illegal.
I guess that's a good analogous.
It's one of the ones that's closest. But then it's consumer goods. So then you look at clothing, and there's not another model really. You got liquor, and then you have other consumer goods like clothing or what have you.
Right, and one of the big hurdles that I've heard people talking about is the regulation, right? And I hate conversations about policy and regulatory, but it is so overwhelming, right? The banking, talk to me a little bit about where we are with regulatory issues and where we need to go. And when I say we, I just mean, consumers, the business.
The industry. That's a good question. And it's interesting because banking has been an issue. And I'll even give you an example. You can't talk to anybody in the cannabis industry who won't say, I got my account shut down. I've had 7 or 8 accounts shut down since pre-licensing.
What does that mean?
So here's what happens. You're doing business and sometimes, like you said, you have to take cash in and out. Wires. We do a lot of wires is another industry. Norm now because it's a little bit easier than pull out cash that gets you yellow flagged. And it's interesting as Wells Fargo, B of A, then they won't tell you why they're shutting your account down. And I've had friends that work at the bank that tell me is how I know. But you get a letter that just says some regulatory that fine print that you probably knew about in your agreements when you went there. We're shutting your account down. You have 30 days to get the money out, and basically it's saying we don't have to explain ourselves to you. And then when you call and ask them, they're like, we can't share that with you. But then I've talked to some managers and owners.
But do you ask them? I mean, they can just shut you down. And who is doing the shutting down?
There's algorithms and the back end and that gets triggered. And I don't know what those are, but that's what they're telling us.
That is horrifying.
Yeah, and we finally found a bank like 3 weeks ago that we're very excited about. It's one of 76 licensed high-risk banks. And high-risk, I mean, that means they can do casino, cannabis, and adult if they want to do. But fortunately, they have morals. They're not doing the adult. So that made us very excited that they actually care about cannabis. And, I don't mind going to the casino once in a while, so I won't say anything against that. But, normally a cannabis bank, they charge 2 to 3% per cash deposit. They charge $2,000 a month. There's all these extra fees.
Jeez.
And we had to pay
That's a racket.
Oh, and we had to pay it because we had no choice. But the problem with that is if you go to a normal bank and then you do a transaction, the normal banks now, Wells Fargo, the big ones, already know that this is a cannabis bank and they could shut that account down because you did business with that bank. So that's another problem that people are having that we finally think we found a solution. It's our first week with the bank. So check back with me in 3 months and I'll tell you if everything's panning out. But it's looking real good because it's one of 76 licensed, high risk, FDIC, the whole thing. Only $100 a month. Normal banking fees.
I mean, it's astonishing to me. And it's also like, knock on wood. Mm-hmm. That is a huge barrier to entry for anyone. That an algorithm is shutting you, I mean, how do you, I mean, we were talking down, in the Ready Room about, the power of cannabis to treat diseases and symptoms. And, so let's talk about that. It's not just a matter of sitting down with Snoop and getting baked, right? Yeah. There are applications for this. And, talk to me about the things that you're seeing, the trends in the usage of cannabis, mainstream and medical.
I mean, one of the trends is obviously it's becoming more normalized. The mainstream. As a matter of fact, I'm real excited about the fact that we are co-producing Whoopi Goldberg's launch of her brand that she had pre-licensing called Whoopi and Maya. It was one of the first feminine products in the industry, and it's the first time that I'm seeing. We're in charge of sponsorship sales that we have like Wise potato chips. Blizzard Video Games Entertainment doing the Diablo game activation there.
Yeah.
And then we have Zenko, which is a device to smoke cannabis in, and Jetty Extracts, which is the product we're going to be smoking it, all on the same event. They're going to be on the same step and repeats. They're on the media that's already going out, the press releases. I think she was just interviewed by Forbes. She was just in an article a couple days ago about cannabis. What's interesting is I'm seeing that I can't wait till that's more normal.
Right.
But right now we're all like, wow, we can't believe that we had Blizzard, who just got bought by, I think Microsoft for like 60 billion or some crazy number. Yeah. And they're a part of an event with us that we were on the call with their whole team, like 20 people.
That's insane.
And we all smoke.
That's like a blue
cannabis.
chip,
Yeah.
Are you seeing more and more of that kind of normalization?
No, I'm saying it's just now starting.
It's just now starting.
And you saw that Cali Vibes had some major cannabis brands, and they had corporate sponsors like usual. So you're seeing it, but it's still in its infancy.
Yeah, and so one of the things that you do, like because you're a full service kind of management group, is the brand building. And I am super curious. A brand is a critical part for any business. And I would imagine, especially in an industry as nascent as cannabis. But how do you build a brand? I mean, a brand is a collection of stories, basically, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're working with your clients, what is your advice for brand building?
First of all, that's a really good question, is you got to find a niche. You have to have something special and different. And this reminds me, back to the clothing days comparison, is when I owned Skinny Magazine, we would have, Solon Clothing, Ed Hardy, Affliction, back when they were the
Affliction.
Cool thing, Tap Out Clothing. There's a culture and lifestyle that drew people to that. And there's a brand loyalty that was built by major mainstream marketing. And the challenge in cannabis is we can't do a lot of that yet. So it's all got to be grassroots. Social media, you can't even do it without getting your account shut down. There's still so many barriers for us to brand and market it. That it's a big challenge. So you have to have something, a shtick, something special, a story or a product that no one has, or something, and also lots of connections. That's the other thing. You have to be connected and know people, because it's a small community now, and you can't just go get a $50 million investor and then open up a brand. Like that's not going to work. You're going to have money, connections, good ideas, and people with experience, on your team to help you actually be successful.
Yeah. So do you have an example of a really powerful brand that you have helped build or launch? That's
a good question. And it's funny because we help support brands at different levels. Sometimes it's with brand development. Sometimes it's with sourcing good product, whether it be flower or the distillate for a cart, or it could be events. We've helped a lot of brands with the event marketing, tying into the trade shows, and they're boasting that they did 40 new accounts, new stores open after the event that they did with us. So those are good success stories. But as far as the brand, I think one of the brands that we helped start from infancy that's in over 100 and something stores now is a brand called Zana out of Adelanto. There's one that's still in business, and out of the probably half a dozen that we've supported, a lot of brands couldn't make it, whether they had the best advice in the world. I don't get to make the decisions. I just get to give suggestions and give advice. If they take it and use it is another thing,
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. There's a few brands that are doing real well. There's a couple other brands I just don't want to mention, names on at what level without more discussions. But
and on those brands that don't make it that you just mentioned, like why? Like what is the why of that?
There's many reasons, and each one's different, and then some of them are combined, all of them. But overspending, sometimes the executives are overspending or overpaying themselves. We see that a lot, buying brand new cars and houses and everything else, meanwhile the company is hemorrhaging, or making bad decisions reputation wise, doing bad business, and then small community, everybody shares that, and then it just kind of like seems to implode for some of these bigger companies. And then what's another? And then just competitiveness also, there's a lot of competition. So there's so many brands and only so many legal licensed buyers because of, again, back to regulation. There's not enough access yet. I mean, there's a liquor store on every street corner.
Yeah.
But I've read and seen some stories lately that cannabis usage is either near equal or close to alcohol consumption in some states or countries. I forgot the numbers. But to hear that and know that there's only 600 stores or access points in California to get cannabis, but there's 10,000 liquor stores, we would be much more successful if it was a lot easier to open up a store is the point.
And what, like, if you're looking right now at the future, I mean, what excites you about this industry?
I think one of the things is what I just mentioned is that it's becoming more and more normalized as we go, and to have corporate brands next to them more and more, I think shows the validity of what we've all been saying forever, that this is a plant that should be a part of our life, forward facing and publicly, because we shouldn't have to hide in the shadows. I mean, people have been smoking weed for hundreds of thousands of years, and for the last few hundred years, like you didn't even know half the people in your family smoked. Maybe you've experienced this now that it's more normal. You have an aunt. I've had many aunts, uncles, cousins go, oh, I've been smoking the whole time. I didn't know if you smoked. So you don't even tell each other, right?
Right.
And then now you find out like your teacher did it and your attorney has been smoking and all this stuff. So to see that growth and it be normalized where it's not even a topic anymore is what I'm excited for. Like we don't have to talk about it being normal. Like we don't talk about how prohibition got alcohol legal anymore because it's normal. And I can't wait for that point.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about cannabis?
Misconception generally?
Yeah, so, like it's a gateway drug.
So that is one of the things, like you read all the political posts and comments and people that are against it and say that it's going to get you gateway to a harder drug. And actually, there's studies that show that cannabis has helped people get off of heroin and meth and other things. So I think that there's a little bit of research out there. It's just not at the scale that we need it at and not publicly, promoted the way that it needs to be. But I think that's going to be coming with the rest of the normalization. Yeah.
Let's go back to that social media thing. Like it blows my mind in this day and age that you are limited. Like we're like, okay, like we're not going to get political here, but like the First Amendment right, your First Amendment rights on social media, right? Like how does that collide with the message, that your clients and that your company, like why are you restricted? I don't understand.
It's a really good question. And it's interesting that just recently, one of our partners on one of the other projects we're doing, Earth Star Festival, I don't know if you've got the background on that, but we're doing the first unconference, basically during the day, speakers talking about plant medicine and the nuances of cannabis and other plant medicine products that are proven to help you with anxiety, PTSD, and all kinds of different things. Well, anyways, what was the question?
I don't remember.
You don't either.
No.
The misconceptions.
So
on that,
on social media, right?
Social media,
the First Amendment, like where.
So she's on the board. I forgot the name of the company, but they had a backdoor meeting with Meta regarding. Basically saying, do you know that the more you keep doing this to the educators and there's a bunch of foundations that are pushing for it for health reasons to help people with the things I mentioned, PTSD and such. And so when you shut these accounts down, you're actually could be hurting people.
Right.
Not, it's not just the person that's trying to get high.
Right.
There's people out there that need education to know how do I help with my mental illness,
Right. Yeah. And there's science behind it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if you're shutting down an entire industry, that science is not getting in the hands of the right people. And I just think I find it, I'm frustrated on your behalf that is an actual issue. And so when do you see that changing, right? That the ability, alcohol, come on, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It is pervasive. It is danger. It is a more dangerous drug.
Tobacco too.
And tobacco. So like, what is the thing that is causing, is it a reputation? Is it like the Spicoli factor? Like, what's the deal?
I think it's a little bit of everything, but also back to my excitement on how it's normalizing. I think that it is happening. It's going to happen. And I feel like in the next couple of years, not tomorrow, not this month or anything, but it seems like just from my comments I just made right now about these meetings that we're having regarding plant medicine and these algorithms and why is this happening? Like, can you change the algorithms where, if somebody's posting themselves getting ripped high, like falling over, cut those ones off. But if somebody's up there posting facts about how cannabis has helped this many people, and there's studies with references,
Right.
or psychedelics, or there's all kinds of things that they're realizing can, if you do it properly, can actually help people more than hurt them, while alcohol is still being promoted.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this, I did a story on a guy named Bob Patton, who is the great grandson of George Patton.
Oh, yeah.
And they have a family farm in Virginia, and they were going to lose it, right? It's a family generational farm. And the only way they could save it was to start harvesting and growing cannabis plants, THC, not just hemp based. And it took a lot, right? Because the great grandmother was still alive, and she's like, "We are Pattons. We do not do this." And eventually, they all came to an agreement, and they started growing on the George Patton's farm, which I just find to be most excellent. And it saved the family farm, right? Like there are other ways to look at cannabis, because the industry and the demand and the applications and the research and science still that's going on is very, very exciting. And so, from where you sit, how are you staying ahead of the trends? Or are you guys actually driving the trends?
I feel like it's a little bit of both. And I think that the reason for at least us and most people that are as passionate and involved in the industry as we are, it's from communicating, having dialogue every day with operators and growers and the brands and the dispensary owners, is being in those communication channels, when being at these events where we can actually share our pain points and our successes. And so I think all of that it leads to the success of what we're doing. It's not, you can't sit behind a desk like some consulting groups do, or marketing agencies I see in the industry, where you're behind a desk, maybe reading some trades and then telling your clients, this is what you need to do.
Right. It's totally
sense.
different.
You need to ear to the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I see where you're coming from on the need for a conference, right? Like that peer-to-peer sharing, information sharing is critical if there's nowhere else to get the information and the research.
Yep.
Right. And so, the people who are coming to your conferences, who are they?
Well, they're not our conferences. We partner with the conferences. We do after parties. Basically, the conferences are, you have the booths, like if you've been
it's
to
just
any
like
trade
a
show.
traditional trade show.
And they're as professional. Actually, some of the trade shows are owned by major corporations that own trade shows nationally and such. But when you're there, you got 10,000 plus people, 50,000 people, and you're trying to speed date, we say, at the booth. You're getting information. We don't really get to build a rapport and have any dialogue. So what does everybody do afterwards, especially the ones in Vegas? They all book hotels, they book small venues,
right,
and they invite the clients over. What we've done is just elevated that and put together a production at a high production level. We're talking like 6 figures usually, with entertainment, food, drinks, and activations versus booths, and give those people a chance to come afterwards and have continuous conversations that they had during the day to hopefully do some good business.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And you are a serial entrepreneur, right? You've done a lot of things.
I laughed on my way here. I was thinking about the questions you might ask, and I thought I've probably started 12 companies, LLCs over my life, and 2-3 of them were very successful.
Yeah, no, I mean, your background is very entrepreneurial and very experimental, and you're a risk taker. Like, you've got all the qualities of, like the Bransons of the world, really kind of blazing trails. What kind of entrepreneur is going to succeed the most in the cannabis industry? Like, going through the experiences that you've had, what kind of person is going to succeed?
You can't be scared.
Yeah.
You gotta, if you believe in something, you gotta be passionate, and then you gotta get some people around you that know what they're doing and have trust, and put your best foot forward.
Right, and you can't blow all the money on cars.
Oh,
right.
No,
I love that.
Or on the brand itself. So you gotta spend your money as freely as you can,
right,
to be successful. But you also need to spend some money. That's one of the challenges. Sometimes we can't get getting marketing dollars out of a lot of brands. It's like, I got to spend how much,
right,
to get. I'm like, well, there's a number here, that a percentage, 10%, 15% of what you want to make, you should be spending in marketing, right?
Right.
So if you're not doing that, what are you going to do to get your brand out in front of people?
And what do you think, in your experience, 12 startups and, events and media, what do you think it is that you have that has created this really, you're a part of a movement, right? Like normalizing. I mean, you're not out lobbying, but you're doing something even more powerful, and that's, perception based. So what do you think your special sauce is, your secret sauce, for pulling this? Is it your fearlessness, your risk aversion? Like, what is it that you have?
I think it's, I keep using the word passion because it is there.
Yeah.
And everybody we work with, we discuss that we see that, and they see that in us, and that we are problem solvers. We don't give up.
Right.
And if there's an issue with getting your brand to market, we're having packaging issues. We can't get the packaging from China because it's Chinese New Year. Like, problem solving, I think, is the biggest thing. Our logo used to actually have a handshake because we thought we were bringing together and bringing good business. But then after 4 or 5 years, the handshake, the handshake's already been done. Now it's problem solving and finding solutions to your problems.
Yeah.
And so if that answers your question, it's
yeah,
a little bit more.
It does. And, passion, we talk a lot about it around here. It's a big driver of entrepreneurship. But, to use the word passion and pro forma, in the same paragraph, I think is very telling, because if you chase your passion solely, you will fail without the pro forma side of your business.
Without a business plan.
Yeah. And so, is it hard? How do you start to teach people about the pro forma, the deal flow, how to raise money? I don't even know how the deal flow works in the cannabis industry. How do you start that educational process with people?
That's a good question. And it's, again, going through the things and showing what we've been through, what we've experienced, and what we're using as far as spreadsheets and pro formas and the data that we're using, the software for tracking, whether it's HubSpot or Notion or what have you. It's and a lot of cannabis companies, because there is there's corporate people involved lots of times. So you have them pushing them to be more organized, more data driven. But you're talking about, a grower from 20 years who wasn't even allowed to write things down for many years because you didn't want it to be in your house of what you're making. To segue those together is been interesting and is one of the challenges, but it's not impossible.
Yeah. I mean, I feel really lucky that I got to talk to you, because it is, the cannabis industry, people still are like, ooh, there's still a perception issue, but it is really one of those industries that is changing lives and health. And, 100%. I mean, it's really, really important. And, but it takes a certain kind of personality to be a part of this nascent industry. And I'm really glad that you were able to share your insights to these entrepreneurs, because you can't just go into it thinking it's all about weed and partying, because
you're not going to make a ton of money right away.
You're not going to make,
this is a long play.
Yeah. Talk about how long, because I remember the first big company to come out with, it was a medical company, and I think it was CBD oil for Charlotte's Web. Got a lot of attention. I think that was what,
in Colorado, right?
Yeah, Colorado. Of course. Hey, man, that's my mothership
cool.
out there.
Colorado.
And so they got a lot of attention. Perception started changing, and they had targeted and really done a lot of services for people who had seizures. Right? They named it after a girl, Charlotte's Web. But they didn't have a good business model, right? And they remember, and they started sucking wind on the revenue side. And so, I think that what you're saying is finding that balance between that passion and the doing good, and just wanting to bring light to this, and also just the business side. Yeah, you can't. Passion is not going to pay the bills. You got to have both of them. So, thank you for being so frank and open, and really setting the record straight.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah. And we wish you so much big, huge, smoky
Hope to see you
success.
Again. You got to come out to one of our events.
Yeah. I would love that.
Cool.
Awesome.
That'd be
Thank
great.
you.
Appreciate
Good
your
to meet you, Jason.
Thanks.
All right.